What's up, y'all? Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show, brought to you by the Institute of Clinical Excellence. My name is Dustin Jones. I'm one of two lead faculty members in the older adult division with myself and Christina Previtt. We have been rather busy in a different way, especially with all that's been going on with the COVID-19 pandemic. We've been rocking with our online courses with MMOA, or Modern Management of the Older Adult Essential Foundations. That cohort's wrapping up. We're starting the next one on May 13th. People that have been through that course, Essential Foundations, can take Advanced Concepts, and that's wrapping up this week. And then that next cohort's going to be starting on May 20th. So we're pretty busy on the online front. I hope you all are doing well. They're listening to this, but I wanted to speak to something that I've been observing, especially within the past week, just with the cultural climate that we find ourselves in with the COVID-19 pandemic and a lot of the debate around when should we open things up? How should we do it? What are the dangers in opening it up? What are the dangers in keeping things closed? And I am not smart enough to speak to this whatsoever. I may have an opinion, but it's very likely it's a very uninformed opinion. So I'm not going to speak to that particular situation. However, I think if you observe some of those conversations, it's very interesting to think about that from our perspective of physical therapy or even in healthcare, in terms of safety and in terms of risk or danger. What scenarios are there where we may be pursuing safety, for example, that ultimately ends up being dangerous? When we are trying to uphold safety as the primary objective, to where there could be a ultimately net negative result. Now, I'm not saying I'm leaning towards that side with this debate of the economy and handling this pandemic, but I think about that from our standpoint, from physical therapy and the healthcare side of things. So I wanted to speak to when there are certain scenarios where the ultimate pursuit of safety may actually be dangerous within kind of the healthcare realm, specifically speaking to our world of physical therapy or rehabilitation. I think the first one that has been very interesting, especially in the world of geriatric physical therapy, that has become more and more prevalent and clear over the past few years, is the realm of falls prevention within more acute settings. And so if you haven't spent much time in acute settings, whether it's acute care, maybe an inpatient rehab facility, where there's been a big push to lower the amount or the number of falls within that particular facility, to where we want 0 falls over a certain period of time. And the measures that have been taken to really try and meet some of those goals have been something like bed restraints, for example, with certain individuals. Bed alarms is another one, or really decreasing people's physical activity levels or decreasing the number of times that they're up on their feet, to where the goal is to ultimately reduce the number of falls and their risk of falling. But if you follow along some of those programs and their actual results in terms of what they're able to achieve, there have been several studies that have shown that some of these programs have actually increased patients' risk of falling. Ultimately, because they have limited their physical activity, there's been associated deconditioning, and when there is that point that they do get up on their feet or maybe get discharged home, for example, that their capacity is lowered and their risk of falling has actually gone up, and it could result in a fall. And so this ultimate goal or pursuit of safety has actually backfired and been more dangerous than how we were handling things beforehand. That's one example. Another example is a common scenario of trying to remove all risk in one's life. We typically see this with certain situations where a healthcare provider may say, you know what, Doris, you're getting a little wobbly, when you're walking. You probably want to get away from that cane, and you probably should go with a rollator walker. You need those four wheels, you need those brakes, you need that nice seat to make sure that you stay nice and safe. You probably want to avoid stairs and curbs, and I wouldn't walk too far from your home. You want to make sure that you park really close to the front door of the grocery store. We want to really remove any risk of you potentially tripping and falling. Or the common scenario of, I don't think it's safe for you to live in this home. You should probably go to an assisted living facility, for example. Now, I know there are times and situations where that may be warranted and that may be the best decision, but how often have we seen some of those recommendations and those patients really take those recommendations, and what happens as a result? Their physical activity levels inevitably end up going lower than what they were before. There's associated deconditioning. There's some of the psychological impact of really questioning their capacity. The lack of confidence, fear of falling can really go up in some of those scenarios. And ultimately, at the end of the day, these folks may have reduced performance and ultimately increase their risk of a fall, even though they have removed those areas of risk based on recommendations of healthcare providers, and oftentimes it's family as well. Now, I know that there are situations where those recommendations are definitely warranted, but man, I know a lot of you all see this situation a lot where those recommendations have been made to really remove all risk, and ultimately there is functional decline afterwards. The ultimate pursuit of safety can definitely lead to danger in that particular situation. Then the third one, the one that really hits home for me, and I think many of you all that we've really experienced this, is in exercise prescription, where we are working with individuals that we may perceive as fragile, as weak, as we could potentially harm them with whatever intervention or activity that we are trying to do. And so what do? We see potential danger and we say, all right, we're going to take the safe route where we can ensure that we are not going to cause a vertebral fracture, for example, when we're going to do that particular exercise, or a deadlift would be a great example there. We are going to remove that risk. We're going to make sure that we stay safe, and we'll be able to give them an exercise that's probably going to have some benefit, but we'll make sure that we're covering our bases and some of those big asymmetrical risks. And so oftentimes what happens when that is the thought, we end up with the underdose therapeutic exercise program just mixed in with some long arc quads, some lovely ankle pumps, maybe some straight leg raises, not with resistance, keep in mind, but just kind of, no weighted straight leg raises, maybe do some glute bridges in there, that kind of cookie cutter routine that we see with so many of our older adult patients. We're trying to pursue safety, we're trying to do a good thing, but at the end of the day, what is going on? At the end of the day, we're likely not challenging them to a point of adaptation. They're likely continuing to have that functional decline, and they may be worse as a result, to where our exercise, our ankle pump, our Jane Fonda's, as Christina loves to say, or glute bridges may actually be considered dangerous. Yes, we're not causing any musculoskeletal injury per se, but we are not taking that opportunity to provide them an adequate stimulus to where they're going to positively adapt and get stronger, improve their balance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is a dangerous and risky situation. And so there's lots of scenarios. Those are just three, but I want us to really think about some of those scenarios where we are solely focused on safety, to where we may be blind to some of the risk that's involved with that pursuit of safety, of when safety can be dangerous. So 3 common scenarios that I want you all to be aware of are kind of the zero falls policy in acute settings. Very common, but they're starting to kind of pull those back. You're not seeing too many bed restraints nowadays, especially with some of this data, and that's a good thing. That we want to think about that. The complete removal of risk is the second thing. Whenever we make these recommendations to where, they should go on this assisted device, or they should move out of their particular home or apartment because we know they'll be safer somewhere else, well, ultimately that safety, that safer place could ultimately end up in a dangerous situation of continued functional decline. And number 3, the big one, the most common one, especially in our world, is the safety of exercise prescription. We're trying to uphold the safety to the highest degree, to where we end up giving them this underdose program littered with ankle pumps and long arc quads that aren't dosed appropriately for these folks. And yes, we're not giving them muscle strains, we're not causing vertebral fractures, but we're giving them continued physical functional decline as a result. And that can be a very dangerous situation for many older adults. So think about when safety can be dangerous, and let's be very thoughtful and weigh both sides of that equation when we are prescribing exercise, when we are making recommendations, when we are discussing things with our folks. We need to think about that. All right, so think about that, y'all. If y'all have any other situations or scenarios that you've come across where safety is dangerous, comment on this Facebook post. If you're watching it here, if you're on the podcast, shoot us an email, hit us up on Facebook, tag us, or Instagram. We'd love to hear your thoughts on when safety is dangerous and some other scenarios that we may not have discussed in this particular podcast. So thank you all for listening, for hanging out with me. Once again, MMOA Essential Foundations, our 8-week online course, our next cohort starting May 13th. We discuss risk, the risk versus reward quadrant, how we think through applying exercises to this quadrant, how we think about the traffic light of exercises to make sure that we know these absolute contraindications to activity and when to stop activity, but then also when to proceed with caution and how to monitor. We talk a lot about that in Essential Foundations. And then Advanced Concepts starts on May 20th. We'd love to see you all there. Ultimately, once you get through those two courses and MMOA Live and pass the skills check, then you are certified in modern management of the older adult. So if you have any questions about any of that stuff or when safety is dangerous, hit us up. Y'all have a lovely Wednesday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review. And be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.